What's going on, guys? Dan from SSG bringing you another Edison format deck profile. This time I am profiling what I believe is one of the most powerful decks in Edison format currently. It is the Lightsworn deck. We're going to get right into it. We have the full 3 copies of Super Nimble Mega Hamster. This card just gets your game plan going, goes and fetch a Raikou, which is your main force of interaction, and it's just a really strong card. I've been liking this card quite a bit in Edison format. All 3 copies of Raikou, like I said, main form of interaction. It mills your deck, interacts with the opponent. There's not much else you really want to be doing in Lightsworns. On to 3 copies of Lila. Once again, just clear those back rows away, be linear, interact with the opponent, mill some cards over. This card is excellent. All 3 copies for that reason. I think you just want to be linear, milling your cards over, and just like doing exactly what your game plan is, which is just be linear, aggro, and some of those big monsters in the late game. We have 2 copies of Celestia here. Of course, it is a fairy, so we're going to run 2 copies. I almost wanted to go up to 3. I think this card is extremely powerful and wins games by itself. But I think 2 is fine. It's a little more consistent this way, and it's just really strong. It's a fairy. It's a Lightsworn. It's what we want to be doing. Of course, 2 copies of Judgment Dragon. We just want to build our deck to summon this card as consistently as possible. This is one of our main win conditions. It's one of the most powerful cards in the Edison format. It's just a very strong card. Everyone knows how powerful this card can be. We have a full 3 copies of Christia. Now, Christia is, in my opinion, one of the best cards in Edison format. You should build decks around this card. It's so powerful, and it just wins games on the spot. The added card from Grave to Hand is a lot better than people think it is. It's not just a 2800 stick that can prevent special summons. The +1 is so powerful, and this card just does amazing things. And of course, we're building the whole deck to be able to summon this card as well as summon Judgment Dragon. So those 5 cards are really going to be able to facilitate a lot of our winning boards. And Christia is just one of the best cards in the format. It's so powerful. More fairies. 3 copies of Herald of Orange Light. This is another way for us to interact, and it's just really broken. We want to pick exactly what we want to interact with, unlike Raikou, where like they can attack, and then sometimes we have to like force pop something. This, we get to specifically target the thing we want to negate, and negate that thing, and that's what makes this card so powerful. Of course, it's a fairy monster that helps get more fairies into the graveyard to help facilitate the summon of Archlord Christia. The card's just really powerful, and it's exactly what we want to be doing. We have a full 3 copies of Soul Purity and Light. Now, this is a fairy. You can drop 2 lights out of your graveyard to special summon this into play. And it's just going to be super aggressive. It's going to bait out opposing bottomless trap holes, opposing dimensional prisons, things like that, opposing wing blasts, so that we can then drop Judgment Dragon and Archlord Christia. This card is just going to be one of our main ways to win the game once we're pushing with this card and Lightsworn. Say we resolve something like a Celestia, then drop Soul Purity Light behind it. That's a lot of cards they just lost and a lot of pressure they're facing down. So this card is going to do quite a bit for our deck, and it's just been really strong. More fairies, 2 copies of Honest. This is just a staple. It does what it's supposed to do. Of course, my favorite mode of Honest is being able to protect your Lightsworn monster so that you can then summon Celestia on the following turn. But overall, it's a fairy monster. It's going to be Honest. It's going to be great. Now we have a slew of one of Lightsworns to make the consistency of summoning Judgment Dragon as consistent as possible. We have 1 copy of Jane. I really would like to play more Janes in this deck, but I think that it's just the other ones are a little bit more better. Like, I'd rather have 3 Lilas than 2 and 2 in this specific metagame, but I could see a world where Jane is just really good. I mean, it's very good against Blackwings, where it threatens to attack over Shura. It threatens to attack over the Alias out of the opposing hero beat decks. This card's just really good. It kind of just does its own thing and comes down, but only 1 copy for now. We then have 1 copy of Lumina. Of course, Lumina can provide some card advantage by just bringing, or more pushing, right? More tempo advantage by discarding a card, special summoning something out, and just speeding down. Also can help mill multiple cards by bringing back another Lightsworn that is able to mill. So this card's just going to be really good and make up and really kill their opponent once we have like JD plus Lumina that's like pretty much lethal or close to it. 1 copy of Arcus. Arcus is great. It's just like it's not great in a lot of positions, but like you can set it. It's fine with 1800 defense. You can sacrifice Celestia on the following turn. Card's really good to bring back with Lumina when you're making a big push. Make your guys untargetable. It's like very powerful, and it's a niche card, but I find it to be pretty effective. We then have 1 copy of Aaron. Now, this is like my least favorite card in the deck. I've kind of just been siding Aaron in a lot of my Lightsworn decks, but I decided to run it in this just because I want to be able to summon JD as consistently as possible. And this was kind of like the next Lightsworn up to do that. So Eren is fine. It's going to do its thing. It will sometimes hit like a face-up Dandelion, which is really strong. But, you know, it's fine. It's good. And then we have Shire. It's a Lightsworn, it's a fairy, and we are just going to play it for that reason. Of course, it does gain attack and can potentially get pretty big, but I think this card is mostly just fairy, Lightsworn. That's exactly what you want out of this card. Also, I guess being a level 3 is somewhat relevant. That gives you a little more access to some of your extra deck cards that are a little harder to make, so 1 Shire. 1 copy of Card Trooper. Everyone just auto puts Card Trooper in their Lightsworn decks, but I don't think people really understand how powerful this card is in this deck and how powerful it can be as a generic card in the format. Like, this card just beats over a lot of the things in the format that are normal summonable. It trades with 1900 monsters at a +1, and it just is aggressive, but it just replaces itself, and that's like why it's so important. It mills your deck, it attacks through a lot of things, it applies pressure to an empty board, and it replaces itself. It's just unbelievable. This card is very powerful, and just put it in more of your decks, but especially Lightsworns. This card is insane. We have 1 copy of Plague. This is really our only, like, mill and get an effect type of card out of the graveyard. We're not even running Wolf because it's a little inconsistent in this list when we're trying to maximize fairies. This is really the only one we get value out of the graveyard, and I think the high power level of making any card in your hand a teleport once this card is in your graveyard is just very, very strong, and that's why we run it. It's just really high power level. Spells, 3 copies of Solar Recharge. Just this card's insane. Draw 2 and mill 2. Card's just really broken. Just the best D-draw. We have Charge Light Brigade, of course, just searching anything and everything. Of course, we have so many targets in this deck since we're playing all the one-ofs. It's going to be very, very powerful for us. 2 copies of Gold Sark. Just search out your Christia, search out your JD. Really strong card. It's just going to win a lot of games in the early game, just on turn 1 doing this, and by the time you have your big monster coming back to your hand, the game is going to be over. Like, you've interacted with them, you've milled your graveyard, and that card is live. 2 Gold Sarks. We have 2 copies of Beckoning Light. I've been on 2 to 3 of this card. I ended up showing this version of the deck with 2, but the card is like really powerful, especially with Christia in the deck, because you just always have something to grab back, and also manipulate your graveyard, making Christia live, as well as JD. You know, you can grab back, like, if you have 5 fairies in grave, you can grab back, you know, Christia +1 fairy, and then make your make it so you have exactly 4 in grave. This card just manipulates your graveyard, it gets your big power cards back, and essentially it wins games in the late game when you just cycle back whatever you want, whether it be Honest, JD, you have Lumina coming back to your hand sometimes, of course Christia, Soul of Purity, and Light to apply pressure. Card's just excellent. I've been between 1 and 2 and 3. I think 2 is like the most consistent version, but I think 3 could be like high upside and things like that. So 2 for now. And then we have 1 copy of Call the Haunted as the 40th card in the main deck. Call's just really high upside. It can combo with Card Trooper, but mainly combos with Christia. Having a instant speed Christia in response to something like a Book of Life is just unbelievable. Card's just excellent. And we can have very, very good responses to our opponent's stuff. On to the extra deck. The extra deck is actually pretty powerful. I like the toolbox that this deck has access to. We have Armory Arm, of course. We have Magical Android, Cataster, Bryonic, and Goyo Guardian, all pretty staple here. Then we go to Flamevelt Rayquaza. I love this card in Lightsworn-based decks because you have so much aggro, so much pressure with the Soul of Purity Lights, with Celestia opening a door for an attack. And this card can kind of just burn people out. You can just, you know, hit a Treeborn Frog for lethal piercing, something like that. And the card just kind of gets bigger as well. I like committing to this card sometimes when I think it's going to stick in play. It gets bigger and pressures the opponent, so card's very good. Another level 6 that ends games, copy of Tempest Magician. You can make this with Plague Spreader plus the Lila, so card's excellent. It's just going to, like, seal games when you can, like, JD, summon Lila, attack, bring back your Plague, synchro for this, and pitch the rest of your hand for lethal. That actually comes up more than you would think. So the 1 copy of Tempest Magician definitely is a part of the reason why I like this extra deck so much. We have 1 copy of Black Rose, of course. Another copy of a card that we think is just special. You don't really get to play it in every deck is 1 copy of Ancient Sacred Wyvern. This card just OTKs people. It gets outrageously big, and it just straight up kills them. Card's just really good. You can make it in this deck, so you play it. We then have 1 copy of Stardust Dragon, of course, 1 copy of Colossal Fighter, 1 copy of Thought Ruler Archfiend, and then we go on to another card that is unique. We have the Avenging Knight Parshath. So Parshath's just really strong. I think it just does a lot for this deck. It's very niche, but when it comes up, it's extremely powerful, and that's the type of high upside card we want in our extra deck. We then have one copy of Mistworm and one copy of Chimera Tech for the Cyber Dragons in the sideboard. And onto the sideboard. We have, I actually like the sideboard for this deck actually quite a bit as well. It just is very balanced and does a lot of different things. So, of course, we have 2 copies of DD Crow, 2 copies of Cyber Dragon, an SSG staple if you've ever seen one. 2 copies of Thunder King, just a good going first card, being able to put this card into play, maybe back it up with an Honest or something. Card's just really good. I also like returning this card off of Beckoning Light and then just summoning it. Like that card's just fine, you know, or being able to like JD blow up the board, then drop Thunder King. It's really hard for a lot of decks to come back from that position. Card's just really good. I like it at 2. 2 copies of Consecrated Light. There's a lot of good dark decks running around. This card's a fairy. It's good. We play it. We have all of our spell trap removal other than the Lila in our sideboard. So we have the 1 copy of Heavy Storm and 1 copy of Giant Trunade. These cards just go hand in hand with one another, and in the matchups where we want them, they're going to allow us to resolve our big plays, and that's exactly what we have in the sideboard for. 2 more anti-spell and trap cards, 2 Royal Decree. Card's really powerful, but we really only want it in the decks to have heavy trap cards. So we're going to bring it in against a deck like Ladder to Beast, against some sort of anti-meta stun deck. Cards decks that just have a lot of back rows that can just be really hard to beat. And this plus JD is obviously just insane. We have 2 copies of Royal Oppression. I love Royal Oppression Lightsworns, especially in this build specifically, with the Soul of Purity and Light. Being able to drop a card like that into play alongside a normal summon and then flip a Royal Oppression is so powerful, and it can be really hard to come back from. And I think, you know, this card is just very good. Of course, you can go JD plus Oppression. You can go Soul of Purity and Light plus Oppression, Resolved Celestia plus Oppression. Those combinations of cards just win games, and I like this card quite a bit in this deck for that reason. And last card in deck would not be an SSG profile without the 1 copy of Trap Dust Shoe. We're going to draw this card on turn 1. We're going to be the best duelist in the room. 85% our opponent on turn 1 by opening this card. And we're going to only side it in. We're going first because that's exactly when we're going to draw it. So that is about it, guys. Without anything else to say, I think this deck is just kind of awesome. It just does what it's supposed to do. It's very consistent for a Lightsworn deck. And we just kind of do the thing. We just do the thing where we summon Christia, we summon JD, sometimes both of those in the same turn. JD, of course, being the first one before the Christia. And that's kind of just lethal. So without much else to say, make sure you drop a comment. Let us know what you thought about the deck. And maybe even hit the subscribe button. That would be pretty nice. So that is about it, guys. Without further ado, this is Dan V from SSG, signing out.